History 102, Lecture 7, Rise of Totalitarianism, Part Japan. So far in these videos I've been doing today, we've talked about Stalin's Russia, Soviet Union, Benito Mussolini in Italy, Adolf Hitler in Germany, National Socialism in Germany. We're now going to talk about another example of totalitarianism. It's not European, it's Japan. So this is an example of Japanese, some people call it Japanese fascism, but it's totalitarian idea. This is a military one though. So if you notice, Stalin, Hitler, and Mussolini are civilian examples. Japan is a military one. So Japan, the Japanese government in the early 20th century had two goals. Okay, two goals. Respect as a world power. Japan wanted the United States and European countries to treat Japan like they treated each other. Okay, so respect as a world power. And second, Japan wanted to develop a sphere of influence in Western Asia and the Pacific, especially Manchuria, a resource-rich part of China, and Korea. Okay. How did Japan in the early 20th century go about these goals? Well, respect as a world power. What did Japan do? Well, Japan, before the 1860s, saw what was happening to China. What was the United States and European countries doing to China in the late 19th century? Carving it up into economic zones. The Japanese government decides that they do not want to be China. Okay, China in the 19th century, late 19th century, Europe and the United States are carving it up. China gets involved in several wars with European countries, and they lose every one of them. So in the 1860s, 1866, it's called the Meiji Restoration. The Japanese government decides we're not going to be China. And so the Japanese government, under the Meiji Restoration, begins a industrialization program and modernization program for Japan. Okay. All those samurai and their traditional costumes and their swords, the government says, get rid of them. You're gonna, the wooden boats, no, get rid of them. You're gonna have guns. You're gonna have cavalry. You're gonna have guns. You're gonna have warships like the Europeans and the Americans have. Japan industrializes in the late 19th century just like we do. Remember in Lecture 2, industrialization? We're rapidly industrializing in the late 19th century. Japan is too. Japan and the U.S. were both competing with each other in a way. We're both industrializing at the same time. What do other European countries do? They fight each other. So what did Japan do? In 1904-05, Japan went to war against Russia and won. Guess what Japan does? They launched a surprise attack on the Russian Navy at Vladivostok in the Pacific. And guess what they do? They sink the entire Japanese fleet. Not planes, but their naval ships. Pearl Harbor is not the first time that the Japanese military has surprise attacked another country's navy and sunk it. 1904-05, the Russian Navy got to experience that. Japan wins. They win a war against a major European power. Right? What else do? You sign treaties with European powers. What does Japan do? They sign an alliance treaty with England. Guess what? During World War I, when Europe is fighting, Japan joins the war too. What does Japan do during World War I? It attacks several German colonies in Asia and takes them over. So Japan is demanding respect as a world power. Okay. when Western states like California in the early 20th century passed laws discriminating against Asian people, Asian citizens, specifically Japanese and Chinese, because the Japanese do. They protest. They say, hey, don't discriminate against Japanese people. Chinese you can do all you want, but I mean the Japanese government protests when they see legislation discriminating against Japanese citizens. They protest. They're like, hey, you can't do that. Do you discriminate against German citizens, German Americans? Do you discriminate against Italian Americans? Well, okay. Do you discriminate against English Americans? You don't. So Japan wants respect to the world power. They want a sphere of influence in Western Asia, specifically Manchuria and Korea. Again, in World War I, they take over some German colonies in Asia. They march into Korea in 1880. In the 1880s, they march into Korea, and in 1910, they take it over. Korea becomes part of Japan. Okay. So the civilian governments over the early 20th century, they're trying to achieve Japan's goals. However, by the early 30s, the military feels increasingly like the civilian government can't do it. Civilian government is not achieving our aims. In 1941, General Tojo takes over rule of Japan. Okay. The Japanese totalitarian government, some historians of political science call it Japanese fascism, because the Japanese government organizes society around this idea of the Japanese nation, Japanese religion, Japanese citizenship, Japanese culture, history. Okay. So, a lot of people think World War I started in 1939, don't you? Right. When I was a kid, I had a book. I got given a book to me for my birthday. It was a day-by-day almanac of World War II. And guess when it started? Not 1939, 1931. The end of the peace. In 1931, Japan invades Manchuria, a resource-rich part of China. In 1933 to 36, you had the Spanish Civil War. The German government has remilitarized. So, under the direction of Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany, what did the German military do? They go to Spain and they help Franco, who's considered the fascist leader in Spain. They help Franco take over. 1935, Italy wants to get involved in the game. Italy invades Ethiopia. And in 1937, the Japanese military government go, you know what, we're here, let's just do it. 1937, Japan invades the rest of China. Which leads us to this idea of appeasement. Okay. What is appeasement? Appeasement is this idea that in the 1930s, England and France decide, the British and French government decide that the best way to avoid a European war is to make Adolf Hitler happy. Hitler keeps making these demands. Adolf Hitler is very open about reversing the Treaty of Versailles. I'm going to reverse the Treaty of Versailles. He's very open about it. And so appeasement is the idea that the British and French government, England and France, decide that let's appease Hitler. Let's keep Hitler happy, and we won't have a European war. So from 1933 to 1939, so 6 years, it's British and French policy to placate Hitler and let him kind of do what he wants. Okay. So they want to avoid another war with Germany. Another interesting tidbit is, by the 1930s, a lot of British and French diplomats kind of come to agree with Hitler that the Treaty of Versailles was too harsh. So that kind of aids in why British and French diplomats want to make Hitler happy, there is some guilt by the 1930s. British and French diplomats in the 1930s are kind of like, well, yeah, we were kind of harsh. We were a little rude, So that kind of what leads them. They feel a little guilt-ridden, so that kind of leads them to another reason to keep Hitler happy. So England and France kind of don't do anything when Hitler rearms. When Hitler helps the Spanish fascists in the Spanish Civil War, they stop paying their war debt. They take over the Rhineland. They take over Austria. They demand Czechoslovakia. What did Britain and France do? They call a meeting. The Munich Conference. The Munich Conference is considered the height or the depth of appeasement. Okay? So Czechoslovakia was created after World War I. Parts of Germany, parts of Poland, parts of Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian Empire were made to create Czechoslovakia. There's a large German population in Czechoslovakia. Hitler is demanding at least the German part of Czechoslovakia. All Germans should live in Czechoslovakia. All Germans should live in Germany. So England and France call a conference to negotiate. Interestingly enough, Czechoslovakia is not invited. Interesting. Okay. England and France allow Hitler to occupy the western part of Czechoslovakia, the German part. Okay. Adolf Hitler agrees to no more territorial demands. Excellent. Okay. The British Prime Minister called the Munich Conference, "We have achieved peace in our time." World War II will start 16 months later. So within a few weeks of the Munich Conference, the German military occupies Western Czechoslovakia. A few months after that, the German military just occupies all of Czechoslovakia. So that's considered kind of the depths of appeasement. The lesson there is, what do you do when you appease tyrants? When you give in too much, right? I'll give you a hint. When England and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939, 2 days after the German military marched into Poland, the most surprised person in Europe was Adolf Hitler. He was completely shocked. Adolf Hitler was completely shocked, blown away that England and France declared war on Poland. Declared war on him, Germany. He was like, why? What do you care? I'm just doing what I've been doing for the last 6 years, reversing the Treaty of Versailles, and you've been helping. Now you're not, all of a sudden. But anyway, so that is the end of that. Thank you for your patience. Have a nice day.